You slip on a wet rock. For a split second, your foot twists beneath you. A sharp pain shoots through your leg. Today, it's painful. You call an ambulance. A doctor takes an X-ray. A cast holds the bone in place. Within a few months, you're walking again. Now imagine the exact same injury. 30,000 years ago, there are no hospitals, no painkillers, no surgery, no metal plates, no crutches. You can't hunt, you can't run, you can't gather food, you can't escape a predator. A broken leg should have been a death sentence. Yet, archaeologists keep finding skeletons of prehistoric humans who survived devastating injuries, broken arms that healed, crushed feet that recovered, missing limbs, blind eyes, even severe disabilities that required years of care. The question isn't how these bones healed. Bones naturally repair themselves. The real mystery is how these people stayed alive long enough for healing to happen. Because a broken bone doesn't kill you. Being unable to survive does. And one remarkable skeleton discovered inside a cave in northern Iraq is forcing scientists to rethink what it really meant to be human. In the 1950s, American archaeologist Ralph Solecki began excavating a cave in the Zagros Mountains of northern Iraq. The site became known as Shanidar Cave. Over several excavation seasons, Solecki uncovered the remains of at least 10 Neanderthals. Most were ordinary discoveries, but one skeleton immediately stood out. Researchers named him Shanidar I. He lived roughly 45,000 years ago, and by every expectation, he should never have reached adulthood. His injuries were extraordinary. His right arm had been severely damaged, possibly amputated above the elbow. Several bones showed signs of permanent deformity. One side of his skull had suffered major trauma. Evidence suggests he was blind in one eye. His hearing may also have been impaired. Modern medical analysis indicates he likely walked with a noticeable limp. Any one of these injuries would have made survival difficult. Together, they seem almost impossible. Yet every major injury had healed, not partially, completely. Shanidar I didn't die from his wounds. He lived with them for years. Anthropologist Eric Trinkhaus, one of the world's leading Neanderthal researchers, concluded that Shanidar survived long after suffering these injuries. That conclusion raised a much bigger question. How? A hunter with one functioning arm cannot easily throw spears. A person with limited vision struggles to detect predators. Someone who limps cannot keep pace during long migrations. For decades, many scientists believed Neanderthals were brutal survivors, strong, aggressive, focused only on survival. But Shanidar I tells a completely different story. Because surviving severe injuries requires something strength alone cannot provide: time. Healing a major fracture can take 6 to 12 weeks. Recovering from extensive injuries may require several months. During that time, someone has to provide food, someone has to carry water, someone has to protect you, someone has to wait until you recover. That means Shanidar wasn't surviving alone. His group was keeping him alive. And that's where our understanding of prehistoric life begins to change. Because the evidence suggests compassion may have evolved long before civilization. But Shanidar Cave wasn't the only place where archaeologists found this pattern. Across Europe and Asia, more discoveries were beginning to reveal the same impossible story. Shanidar I was once considered an exception, a remarkable survivor, a lucky individual. But as archaeologists uncovered more prehistoric skeletons across Europe and Asia, that explanation became harder to defend. The evidence kept repeating itself. In 1908, workers excavating a cave at La Chapelle-aux-Saints in southwestern France discovered the nearly complete skeleton of an elderly Neanderthal. Later studied by French paleontologist Marcelin Boule, the individual became one of the most famous Neanderthals ever found. For years, he was portrayed as primitive and ape-like. But modern reanalysis told a different story. The skeleton showed severe arthritis. Many of the vertebrae had deteriorated. The hips and knees were badly worn. Most striking of all, many of the teeth were missing. Those that remained had been worn down almost to the roots. Chewing tough meat would have been incredibly painful. Yet this individual survived into old age. That means someone else likely helped prepare food. Perhaps meat was cut into smaller pieces. Perhaps softer foods were shared. Whatever the method, surviving without functional teeth in the Ice Age would have been nearly impossible alone. But here's where it gets stranger. Broken bones were only part of the story. Some prehistoric injuries would have permanently changed the way a person moved. At Cima de los Huesos, the Pit of Bones in northern Spain, researchers uncovered the remains of at least 28 ancient humans, dating back roughly 430,000 years. Among them was a child with a severe skull deformity, likely caused by a congenital condition known as craniosynostosis, where parts of the skull fuse too early. The child survived for years. For an individual with developmental challenges to reach that age in a harsh prehistoric world, continuous care was almost certainly required. Long before farming, long before cities, long before written language, humans were already investing time and resources into individuals who could not always contribute equally. That changes the entire picture of prehistoric survival, because natural selection isn't only about competition. Sometimes it rewards cooperation. Evolutionary anthropologist Sarah Blaffer Hardy has argued that humans became successful partly because we evolved as cooperative caregivers. Unlike most mammals, human children remain dependent for many years. No single parent could easily raise them alone while also finding enough food. Groups that shared responsibility gained an advantage. That same instinct may have extended beyond children, to the injured, to the elderly, to anyone temporarily unable to survive on their own. Helping another person wasn't simply kindness. It increased the survival of the entire group. An experienced hunter with a broken leg still remembered migration routes. An older woman still knew which plants were edible. A skilled toolmaker with an injured arm could still teach younger members of the group. Knowledge became as valuable as strength. In many ways, the human brain became our greatest survival tool. But knowledge only mattered if people lived long enough to pass it on. That's why keeping injured individuals alive wasn't a burden. It was an investment. And modern archaeology keeps uncovering evidence that prehistoric humans understood this far better than we once believed. But there was still one enormous obstacle. Even if a group protected you, even if they fed you, even if your bones began to heal, there was one enemy no one could completely control: pain. And recent scientific research suggests that ancient humans may have found surprisingly effective ways to fight it. Pain begins long before a bone heals. The moment a fracture happens, your body reacts instantly. Blood vessels break. Inflammation spreads through the damaged tissue. Muscles tighten to protect the injured area. Every movement becomes a warning. Today, a doctor can prescribe pain medication within minutes. 40,000 years ago, prehistoric humans had no pharmacies. But that doesn't mean they had no medicine. Archaeologists and evolutionary biologists increasingly believe that ancient humans understood the healing power of nature far better than we once imagined. At Shanidar Cave, one Neanderthal burial became famous for another reason. During excavations in the 1960s, archaeologist Ralph Selecki reported finding large amounts of pollen surrounding one skeleton. He proposed that the individual had been buried with flowers. Some of those flowers belonged to plants that have traditionally been used for medicinal purposes. The discovery became known as the flower burial hypothesis. Although later researchers debated whether the pollen had been placed there by humans or carried into the cave by burrowing animals, the discovery sparked decades of research into Neanderthal knowledge of medicinal plants. And today, there is stronger evidence from another source. In 2012, scientists analyzed hardened dental plaque from Neanderthal teeth found at El Cidrón Cave in northern Spain. Among the trapped plant particles, researchers identified traces of yarrow and chamomile. Both plants taste bitter. Neither provides many calories. Yet both have long histories in traditional medicine for reducing inflammation and easing discomfort. The researchers suggested that Neanderthals may have deliberately consumed these plants despite their unpleasant taste. If true, it means they weren't simply eating whatever they could find. They may have been treating illness. That possibility changes everything. Because healing a broken bone isn't just about waiting, it requires reducing infection, managing pain, preventing further injury, and perhaps most importantly, remaining alive long enough for the body to finish repairing itself. The human skeleton is remarkably resilient. After a fracture, specialized cells called osteoblasts begin producing new bone tissue. Over the following weeks and months, the damaged area slowly rebuilds itself. The process is almost automatic, but only if the injured person survives. That's where prehistoric society made the difference. The archaeological evidence from Shanidar Cave, La Chapelle aux Sants, Cima de los Huesos, and El Cidrón all point toward the same conclusion. Ancient humans did not survive because every individual was strong. They survived because groups protected their weakest members. That may sound ordinary today, but in evolutionary terms, it was revolutionary. For millions of years, survival depended largely on individual fitness. Humans changed the equation. Instead of abandoning injured members, they often supported them. Instead of losing valuable knowledge, they preserved it. Instead of relying only on strength, they relied on cooperation. And that strategy may have become one of the greatest evolutionary advantages our species ever developed. Today, if you break a bone, you trust that someone will help you. A doctor, A nurse, a family member, a friend. It feels completely normal, but that expectation didn't begin with hospitals. It didn't begin with civilization. It didn't begin with written history. It began around ancient campfires, where injured hunters were given food instead of being left behind, where children learned from elders whose bodies had grown weak, but whose knowledge remained priceless, where survival stopped being an individual challenge and became something a community achieved together. A broken bone should have ended a prehistoric life. Instead, the healed skeletons left behind in caves across Europe and the Middle East reveal something far more extraordinary. Long before humans built cities, long before they built monuments, they had already built something even more important. They had learned how to keep each other alive,